So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Um, for those of you not aware, we have come up with a bit of a conclusory point with regards to how we're going to be dealing stuff going forward. Just to talk it, I did not mean to click that. Can I go back? Is there a go back? There's no go back. Of course, there's no freaking go back. I can't even turn the camera without being interrupted by some bullcrap. That's just the day I'm at. That's just where we're at here. Anyways. What we have decided upon is we are going to go ahead and consider dungeons with 3-mans. We're going to be doing dungeons as 3 people going forward. 1 tank, 1 healer, and 1 DPS. That seems to be a fairly reasonable way to experience the content in a way that is following the rules of PFR, while at the same time actually giving us some kind of an actual goddamn experience. It should be noted we're doing that while time walking. We are also discounting raids entirely on the gameplay axis. Raids get absolutely no positives or negatives or anything on the gameplay axis whatsoever, because raids, for all intents and purposes, do not exist anymore. We will still be doing raids because there is still a story axis to be considered, but otherwise we are skipping raids henceforth. There are 8 dungeons in the game which have caveats, which we have to work around now. Those dungeons are the 5 from Legion, the 1 from BFA, the 1 from Shadowlands, and the 1 from Dragonflight. All of those are heroic or mythic only. Those dungeons will be treated as raids, and therefore will not be counted under the perspective of gameplay. They will just exist solely for the purposes of story. This is a fairly large amount of content which the game is now going to not get and is going to absolutely hurt its gameplay score. But that's reality. This is the reality of where we're at, and there's nothing to be done about this. We will also be giving every single expansion individual negatives based on how many raids we no longer have access to and how bad that is. It will vary from expansion to expansion. So, for example, the fact that we can't do Molten Core anymore. Oh no, I can't do the worst raid in the game anymore. But by contrast, we also can't do Old War, or Blackrock Foundry, or like anything else, really. Any of the really, really good raids. So we will be scoring that on an individual basis based on a given expansion. We also are doing something on our end in order to try and make up for the game's lack when it comes to the dungeon. Remember, we're doing 3-man. That means every single expansion, without fail, up to Shadowlands, up to and including Shadowlands, will get 3 blanket negatives across the board for abandonment. It's a brand new category just for MMOs, just for WoW, technically. And abandonment means exactly what it sounds like. It is for content that has been abandoned. The number of those raids should decrease as we move with expansion. No, the opposite, Ross. Raids are going to get better as we go forward, which means the number of negatives is actually going to increase because the raids are better. Consequently, as you may or may not notice, the HUD is now up to date, so the score has changed a little bit because we've already ripped several positives and negatives out of the score. But also, BC's score has changed substantially by a factor of about double. So, BC's score has gone from being, I think it was like negative 78 to negative 138. That is plus 40 to story and negative 111 to gameplay. And all that is removing the raids, nothing else. And that tanked the score that badly. Obviously, that is it's a silver number or bronze. I can't remember what we use for MMOs, so that's just for that specific MMO. That doesn't take into account any of the other features like class design or interface design, anything like that. But that's pretty bad. That puts that down along the range of Wolfenstein Youngblood. That makes it worse than Metroid 1. And that means there's 111 gameplay negatives that this game now has to overcome in order to actually get back into the positive range. So thanks for that. And just because several people will point it out if I didn't, what really is so hysterical about all of this is that the game is currently, right now, in a better place for doing older content than it ever has been. That's not actually a joke. That is something that is a recent trend, as recent as last year, that they're starting to go back and actually acknowledge the fact that older content exists and start to bake in features and mechanics, enabling players to actually experience the older content. Now, they also completely screwed up the scaling this patch, but, you know, that can be fixed. At the very least, it can be undone. But, yeah, no, that's where we're at. If they ever fix any of this crap, this is something that can and will be adjusted. That's one of the reasons why I like to label these kind of negatives very particularly, so that they're easy to find and adjust later. We've actually already seen that with FF14. Well, that's a good question, Riker's Beard. First of all, because screw WoW and everything about it. But second and more importantly, there's something over in FF14 which functionally is precedence for the abandonment concept. In FF14, if you decide to go do lower level content, you yourself are shoved down to the lower level. And I know what you're thinking, well, yeah, but no, it's worse than you think, because your abilities are shoved down to that level. And trust me when I say that sucks. It sucks so hard that it's one of the worst features. I would say it's actually the second worst aspect of the entire game. And lo and behold, we give negatives to that on a per expansion basis because it continues to diminish every single expansion separately. They have never not done that on a per expansion basis. So every expansion gets those negatives because every expansion has those negatives. In fact, we were actually talked up to the fact of only giving 3 negatives to each expansion by calling it a blanket negative because of the fact that we have tools in order to be able to bypass it at all. Trust me when I say my original intention was to go ahead and give a negative on a per dungeon basis, which would be a lot more negatives. If it's not obvious, I am really pissed about this. Like, actually, legitimately angry about all of this. So, moving on. We are going to do a couple of quests because now it is extremely late in the day and I've basically burnt this entire day trying to wrap my head around this situation. And yeah, what Huthor says is the other thing. So let me use a hypothetical example. Let's say they decide to go ahead and backport to Shadowlands. Wouldn't that be funny? And so, like, next patch, they decide to go ahead and add follower dungeons to Shadowlands, right? And we test those, and they're fine. We're good, right? That means Shadowlands now no longer gets those negatives. Because it really is a per expansion basis here, especially with regards to the content, because this is fundamentally about content. It is also possible that someday they will solve all of this crap, and that'd be nice. I'm not holding my breath. But yes. Either way, this is where we're at. This is no longer the matter of debate. This is the matter of we are here and getting interrupted by everything in the goddamn world. I always knew this would be a little bit of a problem. Like, of course I did, right? WoW has had a legendarily terrible approach to its content for literally about 2 decades. Give or take. So this is nothing new, really. But I will admit, I had no idea just how bad this is actually going to be in actual action. Like, I want you to just to really hone this in for just a second. I want you to understand that there are Riker's Beard says it's a per game problem. So obviously I do disagree. But the other problem is I could specifically point to an exact example of a dungeon that is not going to get positives because it can't. There is no way to experience the content properly. And that dungeon is 5 separate dungeons in Legion. The Suramar dungeons, the Cathedral of Night, the one on Argus, and Karazhan. That is 5 dungeons we cannot properly interact with or engage in. So all 5 of those dungeons are, for all intents and purposes, raids. 5 dungeons in one of the best expansions in WoW that just, it doesn't get positives for. Because it can't. As an aside, the idea that WoW's gameplay is at endgame is one of the most nonsensical things I've ever heard. No, I'm dead serious. Like, actually think about that for a second. Think about how crazy of a thought that is. Imagine if you played a single-player RPG. Let's say it's about 200 hours long, right? And the last 10 hours is what counts, right? Maybe the last 5 hours. It's just, yeah, hey, look. Now, that's an interesting question. So Ross says it means that bad dungeons won't get those negatives. We are officially past the point at which there are bad dungeons. I mean, even BC is its own statement on that. Like, BC is its own concept, right? It's the only expansion that's actually going to have straight-up negatives to dungeon design that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, name a bad dungeon that isn't Violet Hold after BC. After Wrath, excuse me. Wait, seriously? The train dungeon? The train... Okay. So my favorite dungeon in Warlords is the train dungeon. I've never had bugs in that dungeon. What kind of bugs were you running into? Anyways, I'm sorry. So now I have to actually play the game again, and I really don't feel like it. That's a good question, Bladeville. I'm not sure there were any. I don't think so. Yeah, no, see, the problem is it's really late. So even if I go ahead and start engaging, like if I start Howling Fjord right now, I got maybe an hour. I could get, like, maybe an hour of Howling Fjord in. The idea, okay, Riker's Beard, I know you and I have like completely alien thoughts, but the idea of not reviewing a dungeon in WoW on a positive negative scale sounds a lot like not reviewing a level in Mega Man to me. Like that's the most alien thing I've heard today. And I've heard a lot of things today. I can't even begin to understand that mentality. Do you mind explaining that? Like, why wouldn't you review a level in a Mega Man game? Dungeons are, and always have been, core meat content when it comes to WoW. They are levels. They are a huge portion of the gameplay of the game. Boss design, trash design, level layout. A huge number of dungeons are also either MSQ and or primary optional content. The number of dungeons that would qualify as secondary dungeons are practically non-existent. Like, hang on. Let's actually look at this. Let's look at Wrath for a second. Look at Wrath. So, let's see. Side dungeons in Wrath. Culling a Stratholme would qualify. We've actually already covered that. And, well, okay, no. Violet Hold actually is part of the main story. That's it. That's the only secondary dungeon in all of Wrath, is the Culling a Stratholme. Everything else is either part of a primary chain, like the Nexus or the Oculus, or is actually part of the MSQ, like Trial of the Champion or Pit of Saran. And yeah, Huthor is correct. We will still be reviewing dungeons on the story axis as if nothing changed, because nothing has changed on the story axis. We can still go through and we can look at, like, you know, visuals and music and dialogue and cutscenes and, of course, the plot, because a huge number of plot goes through the dungeons. Ah! That's fascinating, Riker's Beard. I guess I just don't understand. I'm sorry. Yeah, wait till we get to Legion. Let's look at Legion really quick. Let's look at the format of Legion, huh? So let's say we do Ajuna. Okay. So we start down here and we do questing. Okay. Can we go up here and do questing? And those quests lead us to the Academy, and the Academy leads us to a dungeon. And the dungeon concludes the zone. Okay. Valshara. All right, questing. And that leads us to up here at, I can't remember the name of this stupid thing. And that leads to a dungeon. Like, Legion actually had a fascinating approach to it. But Lord Harrowmont asked a relevant question earlier. Let's say that someone new to the game wants to experience Kata. What the hell do they do about dungeons? And the harsh reality is, I don't have an answer for you on that. The easy answer is, of course, find a friend or two and play through the dungeons with you, if you're interested in the gameplay. If you're not interested in the gameplay, your options shrink. One of the negatives I have already given the game is the fact that there's no button to time walk, to go into or out of time walking. Because there needs to be, and let me explain why. Because here's what would ideally happen in a pre-followers scenario. So let's say we're going up to a dungeon. Okay, here we go. And it's the Undercity dungeon. All right, yeah, we've done questing. We're doing questing. Okay, we're at the dungeon. We made it. Okay, hang on. Leave time walking. Walk into the dungeon and one-shot everything. Leave the dungeon. Re-enter time walking and continue the story arc. Because that's as good as that's getting if you don't have friends, or the option to go ahead and have follower dungeons. Now, I suppose I'm lying because I just realized there's actually a caveat on top of that. So we're time walking for Wrath right now, right? So if I decided to queue... Whoops. If I decided to queue for, I don't know, Utgard Keep, I actually could. Boop, and I could just do it right there. While you were time walking, you can queue for dungeons. The problem with that is still reliant on queue times and other players. But that is still an option, and I mean, that's just the MMO standard, right? FF14 has the same basic system. Alright, I've hit this dungeon, queue for dungeon, right? So, that's the primary option right there. I think I'm going to go ahead and just call it for the night. I think that is the correct call. I am in a tremendously bad mood. And, like I said, I've only got like 50 minutes now in my stream time. So we're just going to call today a wash completely. On the plus side, I do think we have a good solution. I think the 3-player mode is going to be the best possible compromise that exists for us to actually be able to experience the content as is, and actually enjoy said content rather than just run through it and one-shot everything. So, yeah. I apologize for throwing up a VOD that's like 20 minutes long. Tomorrow, we're going to do the Howling Fjord. We're going to go ahead and do this stuff right here. I'm going to back away so I don't accidentally click it again. And then after the Howling Fjord, I think we're going to do... Hang on, let me double check that. Because we're only doing part of the Howling Fjord. We're doing the Horde side of the Howling Fjord. And then we're going to move forward to the Grizzly Hills. After the Grizzly Hills, we're going to do Draktherin Keep, which is MSQ. So we might actually hit Draktherin Keep for anybody participating tomorrow. And then we'll hit Zoldrak. And then we'll do Gundrak, which is also going to be another 3-man affair. So I hope to see... And then we're going to do the Borean Tundra. Again! Oh, God. Oh, yeah.